Welcome to Margins and Mandates, the show where plays, pivots, and pressure-tested leadership take center stage. I'm your host, Jeff Lortz, former operator, advisor, and founder of the Agile Operator. My guest today is Jason Sgro, CEO of the Atom Group, a New Hampshire-based software development and cybersecurity firm focused on public sector organizations and critical infrastructure. Jason has built a business that stands out for what it's not trying to be. No scale up at all cost mindset, no big sales machine, no growth mandate for growth's sake. Instead, he has built a highly specialized firm around trust, reputation, and deep customer relationships. In this conversation, we talk about what it means to grow without chasing growth, how AI is changing professional services, and why being the trusted boots on the ground partner can be a far better strategy than trying to be everything to everyone. Let's get into it. All right, Jason, welcome to the world famous Margins and Mandates podcast.
I love it. Thanks for having me.
You probably have wondered, how has my career gone this far? And I've not actually been on the Margins and Mandates podcast yet.
You know, you've been up on my board for a couple of years now, right? Like right in the center there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining me today. It was great talking to you a few weeks ago, learning a bit about the Atom Group and kind of how you got into it. Maybe we can start out by just telling that story a bit, and then just what's the business all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So my story, I come up through technology. And I was exiting a biotech startup. Agamatrix was the name of the company. We did endocrinology, diabetes research, that sort of thing. Kind of came out of that. Thought I'm going to take some time off, and in fact went home and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to take a year off and I don't know, write a book or something foolish." And a couple of days later, a good friend of mine introduced me to Tom, who was the founder of the Atom Group. He was looking for an exit himself. He was actually kind of falling ill at the time, and so it was a little bit of a turnover deal. And at the time, the history of the Atom Group, they were a software development firm, always custom kind of boutique software in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. That part of our business is still alive and well, except we've moved it to be more software and security, software development for critical infrastructure, that sort of thing, larger projects. So there's really still software at a core, but my background was in cybersecurity. We're Gen 1 cybersecurity folks, right? So if you go all the way back to when I joined the field in 1998, cybersecurity was the last thing on anybody's mind, truly. And it's been a weird journey of going from being in the back room to being in the front of a lot of people's minds now. So we bolted on a cyber practice, cyber and privacy, one of the first real dedicated cyber and privacy practices in New Hampshire, and grew from there. Right, we're now public sector facing primarily. We cover all 564 municipal entities in New Hampshire. We do software development for critical infrastructure, everything from privacy counsel all the way out to engineers to help you batten down the hatches for the next time Iran comes knocking on the door. So it's been quite a journey. I've been at this now for 10 years.
So you're 100% public sector targeted. Is that?
Yeah. So public sector and critical infrastructure, and in our region, right? So if you look at FEMA and CISA Region 1, right? So basically the Northeast, a lot of the critical infrastructure providers are private companies, right? So if you think of a Unitil or, for on the electric and gas side, is a great example. That's a private company that is a key part of delivering U.S. critical infrastructure. So we're not entirely public sector, but we're entirely public focused. A lot of our clients are, the pillars of their community, whether it's financially in that whole community works there, or they're actually delivering power, water, that sort of thing. We really focus there.
And was that the case right from the start, or did you just kind of find yourself, in that market and kind of having some competitive, advantage there?
Yeah. So I have kind of an anti-competition mindset. We know as a small company, right, that you can't compete with everybody, and you shouldn't try to. So what we looked for was a hole in the market that we could fill. And truly, most of the cyber and privacy was done by big national firms. They couldn't get boots on the ground in New Hampshire. Maybe they didn't even know where New Hampshire was, right? Like, and so we said, hey, listen, if we go to the major insurance companies, right, who are our primary customers on the defense side, um, we found that they were really looking for a boots on the ground solution throughout the state. So we
Mhm.
said, hey, instead of going out and being the next Rapid 7 or something like that, right, where we're going to compete nationally for a very small margin work on things like penetration testing and all of that. What if we really focused on incident response, data loss prevention? What if we were the trusted boots on the ground consultants and the people that came in an emergency for a very small AOR, right? Just New Hampshire or just
Mhm.
southern Maine to northern Massachusetts. So really a regional play. And what we found out in our market research was nobody was doing that. And if they were doing it, they were doing it as like a 2 or 3 person, very well meaning company,
Mhm.
but very under resourced. And so when it came to everything from nation state threat actors all the way to, just 4 kids in mom's basement in a foreign country looking to make some dollars off the US, nobody was really defending the space well. So we said, we're going to pivot and we're going to do that. And oh, by the way, software practice, you've got this great talent for building secure systems. Let's go help people build software for things like fire trucks, right? Like, let's go secure that. Or let's go take a Medicare or a health system and make that harder. And so it really fit together nice and became a local play.
Yeah, and you get somewhat of a network effect too, don't you? Like when you
100%.
start working with one agency or one organization, you get sort of connected into the others, right, by default, right, because
Yeah.
they're connected together.
Yeah. In a way, New Hampshire is a handshake state, right? Like,
Mhm.
we live in a state where a handshake still means more than a signature, right? And I love that, right? Like, that's good personal philosophy. It's how I was raised. It's how I try to run our
Mhm.
business. And, we did our first gigs, defending the MH airport, right? So our local airport, the State House complex, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, who were those guys that actually showed up in the middle of the night and helped with the thing?
Mhm.
And that word spreads because it's more of a show me, don't tell me kind of thing where it's like, listen, if you actually show up, if you can actually roll trucks, if you'll actually pick up the phone and you're not sitting in some queue for 3 hours with an AI agent trying to like answer your question, all of a sudden you become the person that people call. And it was a 5-year journey from obscurity to front page of everybody's call list for,
Mm.
hey, the bad things happened. But insurance companies actually really helped with that too, because they have people that they insure throughout the state, and they only want to work in a very defined playbook with pre-negotiated rates or whatnot. So when somebody calls up and says, "Hey, I want to raise a claim," now they're giving them our name and saying, "Okay,
Yeah.
we already know these guys. They're going to do a great job. They're going to help, limit the insurance company's exposure by helping the client, and then
Mhm.
everybody wins."
Right. And I think when
Yep.
when we talk to you, you don't have any sales, you don't have any marketing,
None.
no dollars, no headcount
Zero.
on either one.
Yep.
So network and referral marketing, we'll call it,
Yeah.
to get business. To what extent are you turning over customers versus just continuing to extend almost like a recurring, customer, recurring revenue kind of model?
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you look at our two big product lines being software and security, the software clients are, 80% of the revenue is booked in the beginning of the year, right? Because those are existing clients or clients that we know will return on a cadence. So
Mhm.
somebody who needs updates or a new thing every 3 or 4 years, right? So there's a flywheel there that just kind of spins. On the security side, we're close to that. We're probably, closer to 70% booked in terms of retained clients. Because the one thing about being a smaller shop and covering an entire state is everybody knows they have to wait in line. There's a priority. And
Mhm.
so paying for priority and making sure you bulk up your consulting hours, it means that the big chunk of that revenue is satisfied day one of the year. And it gives us some flexibility. The rest of it is a tax, right? We sit around and hope that we're going to be bored, right? That we're not going to get called out in the middle of the night, that nothing's going to happen. We live in these communities, so we surely don't want them to get attacked.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they are going to be attacked, right? We do, more than a dozen cyber events a week.
Hmm.
It's quite busy, and only busier now with the geopolitical climate and everything that's happened.
Hmm.
Certainly, the Middle East and all the proxies there have been kind of let off the leash right now. So we're seeing real heightened cybercrime on the East Coast. uh, we know that not only are we going to get called upon from the insurance companies to help deal with the cyber events, but there's likely projects on the other side of those events, right?
Hmm.
So you discover things that could have been better, and then either internally, as a consultant, or through our partner network of other companies that are more specialized in IT and rebuilding,
Hmm.
we'll farm them out to our friends too, and say, hey, what's good for New Hampshire is good for New Hampshire, and I don't care who does it. But we're not chasing a dollar, and you're perfectly right when you said we have zero salespeople and zero marketing people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. It's not how it's built.
Um, and then, from the standpoint of, recurring revenue, which is,
Mhm.
the magic that everyone's
The
trying to cook
MRR,
up,
right?
the MRR. I mean, your recurring revenue is basically just having your full year kind of booked at the beginning of the year. Is that kind of how you think about it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we do an exercise. We have a top of the year summit where we all sit in a room, the leadership team sits in a room,
Hmm.
and we say, okay, what do we know? Right? Who are the clients that have already signed? Who are the clients that are about to sign? Is anybody upset with us? Is there anything we could have done better?
Hmm.
And then what is the farming we have to do, either through new business development, which could be bluebird opportunities that come in, or something that we diligently go and say, hey, we're not really serving XYZ sector. Like, why don't we go talk to those people?
Hmm.
And which is really just like me and some other people going and having dinner, or showing up to their event and speaking or something like that.
Yeah.
um, but we know at the top of the year what the break even number is, and that's what we go after. And so yeah, the MRR is there. Almost, I wouldn't say as locked in as a subscription model, because that would be kind of unfair to our customers, who I appreciate make the decision to do business with us year after year, right? And the engineers that do a great job to do that and keep them happy. But it feels a lot like a subscription model.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just it's project by project, but just always having a good,
It
solid, full
is.
backlog.
It is. I mean, switching is painful, right? For any customer, right?
Hmm.
The average customer, if you're serving them well, they like you. You're delivering on time and on budget and remembering birthdays. Like, it really doesn't take that much,
Hmm.
because there's friction in switching. When someone switches to another company, something has to go materially wrong in a way that they don't think is reconcilable. And so if you can stay above that line and deliver good, consistent service, right? Trust equals consistency over time, right?
Hmm.
There's just
Hmm.
That's all it is. And so we're a little bit front end heavy in terms of like project managers and stuff like that, because we really value that relationship. I know they can go anywhere for the engineering, right? Like, at the end of the day, I believe we've got some really smart people in the house. They've got incredible backgrounds, a lot of history, with government agencies and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you can find a cyber engineer at the next company or after that, if you wanted to. The relationship and what we do outside of the engineering, I really think, is the differentiator.
Yeah, yeah. So most of the leaders that I talk to, CEOs specifically,
Mm.
are manically focused on growth, right? Because that's where value is created in this
Mhm.
this economy. They've
Right.
got a mandate of some kind, right? To
Yep.
produce, growing margins and top line, right? In order
Mm.
to produce some kind of multiples, right, for their
For sure.
investors. You're privately held. It's a partnership. You've told me
Mhm.
that growth is not a priority, right, in your business.
It's not.
Um,
Yeah.
give me the logic behind that.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like a split mindset on growth. The first is, instead of really focusing on growth as a business objective, we're focused on customers, right? Because we believe that if we take care of customers, if you've got no salespeople and no marketing people, then you're relying on referrals, right? And relying on maybe some disciplined effort, but it's pretty much just referrals. And if you take care of the customers, they're going to absolutely, refer you. And so we will achieve some growth there. We're just not focused on it as growth. We're focused on the customer satisfaction. And the other part of it is that we don't want to chase a paycheck, because there are certain types of customers and there are certain opportunities that just really don't fit our model. And I don't want to be forced into, if you have a payroll that's 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, 1,000 people, you're going to make financial decisions because you've got a huge nut at the end of the month that you need to, ingest, right? So, um, by keeping the company at a sustainable size, right? Like when you keep your company, slightly below 50 people, right? Like let's, as an example, and you've got cash in the bank to just stabilize the company for 6 months to a year if you stopped invoicing, right? So if you can achieve that as a business leader, you now are making decisions that are in your best interest, right? Best interest of the employees, the type of work that you're really good at, which turns out to be best interest for your customer, which turns into referrals for future customers.
Mhm.
And so while growth does happen, a couple of customers a year are new, yes. Does our top line kind of grow? Sure. Slowly, right? Not in any kind of discipline, like, hey, let's do double-digit growth in a year. We don't want to put the effort into infrastructure. We don't want to put the effort into growing the teams like that. And if we stay under that, and I use 50 as kind of my kind of gold measure of if you're under 50 people, you can weather a bad month, a bad quarter, two bad quarters. Like you're not making crazy decisions based on that because you're in a really stable place. And kind of at this point in my career, yeah, okay, could we take on investors, bring on partners, and like try to make this thing huge and go multi-state and all that? Sure, but that's a different life and a different set of
Yeah.
stressors that I really don't think work really well for New Hampshire, right? It's not the best interest of the customer. So we're very happy staying at the size we're at. We're very happy with, single digit revenue growth year over year and just continuing to be, a solid performer in our market.
Well, for you, for a professional services business, growth, requires additional headcount, right?
It
So,
does.
that's another, sort of, incremental risk, right, that you take
Right.
every time you bring on, a new employee. So, I mean, does your growth sort of, just like an accordion with capacity and utilization, or are you
Mhm.
adding headcount or replacing headcount? What's your capacity model look like?
Yeah, so really, it's interesting. The way our model, our capacity planning is there's a lot of entry level engineers, and there's a lot of people that we're giving a first chance coming in into the company, right? So we see a lot of people coming out of the university system. We see transitioning veterans. We see people that are doing career changes. I mean, somebody's a teacher, they want to be a project manager, that sort of thing. So there's a piece of our capacity that's dedicated to building workforce, which I think is valuable. There's also a piece where the flip side of that is in order to be able to do that, you have to have a lot of really senior people, right? So
Mhm.
if you looked at our model, there's almost nobody in the middle, right? Like we've got a lot of people in the first 5 to 10 years of their career and a lot of people in the 20 to 30 years of their career.
Mhm.
And the people in the first category, we find we have good retention. I'd say, close to 4 years on the retention side. But that's just them growing up and figuring out what they want to do, right?
Mhm.
It's not necessarily anything wrong with the model. And then we have excellent retention, 10 years plus on the senior side. So I think the capacity is very stable, and that's part the customers rely on that. You don't want a different senior, consultant every year, right? That's continuity is bad there. And so by having some really senior people, we're able to give that continuity and still keep cost competitive by having them mixed in with some people that are earlier in their career that have great ideas, a lot of energy, all of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So your turnover rate is fairly low then, and when you have it, it's usually the people that have come on board, have learned
Yeah.
the trade, and maybe have, are parlaying that into, something better, at a bigger firm or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And we're
yeah,
proud of them, right? Like or they go out on their own, or they're like, I want to go try a product company, or who knows, right?
yeah.
You know, we look for as a goal, we don't want anywhere near 10%, right? Turnover,
Mm,
right? Which is pretty high bar.
mm,
But if we start getting close to a double digit turnover in a year, we're really looking at our leadership saying, hey, what's going on? Like, are we just in a mode here? Is there a project that's really bad? Like, people leave a company for all sorts of reasons.
right.
But yeah, there's certainly, a huge percentage of the team that is staying, and that's where our cost comes from. I mean, you mentioned kind of where our spend is. 83% of our spend every month is on salary, right?
Mhm.
So that's we don't really have many costs besides bringing in professionals and then using that capacity to satisfy client needs.
Yeah. I mean, typically that's I don't want to say a scary business to run, but a hard one, right? But
Yep.
with a solid backlog and the ability to sort of
Mhm.
manage a backlog and customers' expectations to create that cushion,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
do it successfully. So obviously you've got that part figured out. What is the what are some of like the macroscopic environmental changes that are happening in the world and that are impacting your business either positively or negatively?
Yeah, so I think there's really two. There's geopolitics and there's AI, right? Those are going to be the big two.
Yeah.
So geopolitics, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, conflicts are not good for anybody, right? And while as the kind of hegemon of the world, where we may be responsible for doing the right thing on occasion, it's disruptive, and so we certainly see a huge uptick in cyber events. There's a lot of uptick in really novel technology that comes with that. And so the pace of innovation in cyber defense has to be really hot. That taxes our teams out, certainly incident responders burnout. We're really worried about things like mental health. We're really, really worried about just, family dynamics with people that are, they're out all night long doing all sorts of things protecting, US critical infrastructure. So that's a huge driving concern for us right now. The other one is AI, and I look at AI both positively and negatively. We're really in the infancy, right? So it's
Mhm.
hard to tell what it will replace and what it won't replace. But I can tell already that there's a lot of jobs where a successful professional will be a professional that uses AI versus one that doesn't, right? An attorney who knows how to use language models and knows how to use Claude Code or something like that is going to be uh, better suited for the future than one that doesn't. And not that, this hallucinations and all of that stuff. That aside, because that'll get more or less worked out over the next couple of years. Um, it's not that it takes the work of the thinking person, it's that it does a lot of the busy work in a really good way. And
Mhm.
so, I would never want a client to read a consultation report that was written by AI, just like I don't want my doctor's EMR notes to be written by AI. But there's a certain lookup and there's a certain structure that the language model does a really good job at. So in combination, we are starting to see cost pressures where what used to take two senior level consultants 30 hours to put together can now be done by those same two people in 8 hours. Well, is it still worth 30 hours or is it now only worth 8 hours plus the uplift per, right? Like, so
Yeah.
there's a time billing and there's a value billing. And we've been very strict in time billing. I mean, we bill in 15-minute increments like everybody else.
Mhm.
And, our invoices look like you would get from your law firm that explain in detail how we advanced your cause for the money you spent. Right?
Mhm.
Um, how do you do that when the AI is doing a part of that work? Not the important part of the work, but part of the work. And so one of the things that our business has to look at is value billing ethical in that case, right? Or are we just going to maintain straight billing and reduce the amount of work or the amount of work it takes for a single task and increase the number of clients that a consultant can serve, right? Because there's a thrashing component. See this with software developers all the time. If you have one project to work on for 8 hours, you're much more productive minute per line of code than if you have five or six projects and you're doing context switching. That thrashing has a real impact on the productivity and the throughput. And I wonder if we will see that with the consultants if we took the model of you can now satisfy five or six or seven more people in a day, clients in a day, do they start to see the thrash that we've often recognized on the engineering side?
Yeah. I guess if you think about the unit economics piece of it, which is just, the hour
Mhm.
of an hour invested and what is the productivity outcome,
Right.
right? it's improving, right?
It is.
And that will turn into either lower billings, right, for the same work,
Right.
or
Right.
it'll turn into more higher quality results for the same money, right?
That's
But
right.
ultimately, I think it's the competitive market, right, that's going to dictate, you know, what you can charge, right,
Right.
for that value, right? Just like
Hey,
anything else. I mean, AI doesn't really change
sure.
anything, right? It's a matter of you produce a higher quality result for lower money, right? You're going to be more competitive and win more business, right? So that to me is kind of the X factor with AI is how do you
Yeah.
produce a higher quality result, with the same, people.
Right. Well,
And
yeah, it changes the dynamics of the triangle, right? The that quality, cost, and time,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's like, hey, it's all good, right? If we can produce higher quality work in the same time, great. If we can produce the same quality work faster, there's a customer for that too.
hmm
Um, can we do both at the same time? I don't know. We're going to try, but then the value, and this goes back to the consultant's dilemma, right? Like this goes back to the, hey, if I give you the great idea and you build $1 billion company out of it, and it took me an hour to come up with the idea, but it took me 30 years of experience to come up with that idea, is that idea worth $300? Right? Is it worth an hour of billables, or is it worth more than that? Right? And this is where your big houses, your Deloittes and whatnot, right? Your Booz Allens, right? They struggle with this big time because they've got some of the best people in the world thinking of these things. And are you really going to build $300 for an idea that somebody builds $1 billion company off of? Some people will say yes. And some people say, well, I think it's worth a little bit more than that. And so it's like, okay. So it'll be interesting to see how we solve that dilemma. Um, as a society, not necessarily as a company, right? I could see us staying with straight billable hours. Hey, what it takes, and I'm going to compete in the market. If my product is better than the next person and I can give it to you cheaper, that's good on me and good
yeah,
for you, right?
yeah. I mean, I wonder for companies in your business, and maybe
Mm,
yours is a little less, impacted by this because of the type of client you serve.
mm,
Um, but as you can do more in sort of custom software development faster with AI,
right,
you're less likely to buy commercial software, licensed commercial
for
software,
sure,
right?
for
Uh,
sure.
Public sector is probably behind they're slower to adopt, right, these things probably than,
Mm,
a typical private enterprise. But do you
yeah,
see that happening in your business at all, or can you forecast that?
yeah. I see that in our clients' businesses big time. It shows up in a couple of different ways. The first is AI is really good at picking apart open source software, right? So if AI can see the source code, developing attacks for that source code or vulnerabilities in that source code, the AI is already really good at that. And that's going to drive some people. There's a class of people that are being driven away from open source technology because of that. So that's kind of the first piece.
Mm,
The second piece is what I'll call kind of personal use technology or shadow IT, right? And I say shadow IT, and the people are like, ugh. And I'm like, well, think about it. If you give people AI tools and they are scripting and automating parts of their job as part of their productivity now, that's like little bastions of shadow IT everywhere. Now, that can be really good for immediate productivity gains, but is really bad for enterprise IT management, right? Because how do you now do control of data flow? How do you then make sure you're institutionalizing tools so that if somebody leaves, they don't leave with all their tool? Like there's so many interesting questions there. I see that happening now inside of our customers quite a bit.
mm,
And instead of I need to go buy, I think you're exactly right. And instead of I need to go buy tool XYZ or product XYZ to satisfy this need, I'm able to hobble it together with some scripting and some Claude code and some business automation tools that are, almost freely available. So inexpensive, in fact, that many people opt to pay for them out of pocket and don't go to their employer for it.
mm,
Right. So now I'm paying $20 a month for my own tools. So now I'm developing things on your time, but with my resources, and the legal definitions start to fall apart.
mm.
So it's a really interesting challenge. One of the things that I do advise our clients against is really allowing that self-use technology to take hold as a cultural paradigm, making sure that they control the types of tools that come into the organization and not go after the next shiny thing, because you're all of a sudden you're going to have 30 language models inside of your company that are doing critical functions that you don't really understand or know about from an enterprise level, and that can be dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's one other level of challenge, especially for professional services companies, when you're delivering a work product
Hmm.
to a client that has in some way, right, been
Hmm.
generated or impacted by
Right.
a large language model. Do you disclose that, right? Do you have to disclose
Sure.
it? Is it just part of your IP and it's none of their business? Like,
Hmm.
how do you kind of manage that part of the relationship with your client?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, for us, we have a AI ethics policy that says that anytime you use it, you have to disclose it. I don't care if you're a software developer and it wrote some of the code, that's perfectly fine, right? If that code passes a peer review and goes through our normal quality system and is good code, I am I know that the software can be written well with AI, right? Like maybe not all of it, but certain parts of it really well.
Hmm.
Okay, that's fine, but you've got to put it in the note,
Yeah,
right? There's no passing that work off as internal thought. Yeah, we're just using the tools that are available.
yeah,
We don't try to hide that we used SQL. We don't try to hide that we used some Microsoft technology, or you know, why would we use this? Is just another tool, so don't hide it. And in our reporting, we definitely footnote, the structure of this came from AI, like, or a language model, or the concept of this was co-created with a language model. However, here's the independent thought, right? And so I think people are going to begin, and they already do, like the transparency. They appreciate the transparency because they perceive it's happening anyway.
yeah.
So if you just come out and say it, you're better off.
Yeah, I mean, it won't be long before you're required to do it, probably. So you're probably ahead of the
Probably.
curve.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does New Hampshire have, um, I know a lot of states are developing their own kind of AI governance
Mhm.
laws, right? Is that happening in New Hampshire?
Yeah, so there right now we're in the put the team together phase. There
Okay.
is an AI ethics policy at the state level, but it only applies to government agencies, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And then, if you look at Department of Justice, they have an AI task force. Department of Safety's got an AI task force. Yeah, there's really interesting questions. Think about a police officer that uses a language model to write a police report. Okay, no problem. If it's just like a doctor, if it's proofread and it's accurate, I don't care.
Hmm.
But what happens when the language model develops something and has a hallucination that's not proofread, and it's now sitting in court as part of a police record,
Hmm.
right? So there's a lot of really interesting questions about or the guardrails and guidelines for use, and the ethics around use that these agencies and certainly critical infrastructure need to come up with and decide upon. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but we need to all understand the rules that we are playing by.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fascinating stuff. It's changing every day,
Really is.
which is really intriguing, to follow and try to figure out how to adapt to, right, in our different
Mm.
businesses. So it's really interesting. Listen, Jason, it's been great catching up. I envy your no growth business model. It's something
For
that
sure.
that I'm sure a lot of people would love to be able to run without that sort of the pressure of consistently hitting some kind of double digit percentage growth rate for the masters to be pleased with. But wish you the best. Glad you're carrying the flag for my former home of New Hampshire.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All
And,
right.
take care of your customers out there. You'll be all set.
All right. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jason.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks. Bye.